I think that one of the universal experiences of Warhammer is desperately trying and failing to get your partner into this silly little hobby of ours. Many a disinterested girlfriend has been dragged around Games Workshop in a futile attempt to gauge interest in which army they may like to play. Fingers clamps down on their nose so hard it's like one of them hydraulic press videos. I've been there. I went as far as buying a full army for my girlfriend years ago. A pretty nice collection of Nurgle demons, as they were by far her favourite army during the many litmus tests I ran on her. She was very happy to receive them, but after giving the hobby a go, it just wasn't for her. She found it way too stressful to decide on the colour scheme, and as she's an art student, she spends most of her days painting anyway, so this sort of just became more work for her. So I decided to try a different approach. Something a bit more experimental. I forced her to play the game, and it worked out better than you'd think actually. Let me set the scene. See, I was browsing for events coming up soon, so I can get some much needed practice in with my Emperor's Children. I could just watch some videos or play some games at my locals, but if I don't have a firm deadline for when I have to play, I just won't. And videos only get you so far. So for me personally, tournaments are the best way to practice. But I don't want to show up to a GT without even fully knowing how to play 10th edition, so I wanted something a bit more casual, and then I found it. A one-day doubles event located at the beating heart of Warhammer, Nottingham. It's the perfect level of competition to practice at. Casual enough that people don't mind you taking longer turns and making mistakes, but everyone's still trying to win. It's only one train away, and I'd only need 1,000 points of my blokes painted up. Plus, a doubles event just sounds fun. Have you heard about the millionaires that got squished in that submarine? That's rough, man, that really is. If I had to traverse the toughest terrain known to man, I'd want to do it in my Magcase 2.0, only available at Tabletop Stronghold. This highly durable carry case not only gets your army from point A to point B, but it functions as a suave display case as well. Look how clean your army could look in this bad boy. These cases are stupid durable, able to withstand the full weight of a hearty West Virginian man. That's 3 beautiful feminine boys for those of you with more refined tastes. Historically, my previous methods of transport was the old reliable cardboard box, which was functional if not a little trampy. But I moved on from that method when I was hit by a flash flood on the walk home from game night, and I had to carry my beloved army home in a mushy brown stinky pulp. After that I moved on to one of them old school Games Workshop carrier cases, which was a lot better than cardboard, but bent every fucking sword my army ever wielded. But now I have my mag case. My army is held in tight by magnets, so I can rest assured my army is arriving just as it left. Do you attend tournaments, want to display your army, or just want a little assurance in this rapidly heating state of global affairs? Then this case is for you. Not sold yet? Well, Tabletop Stronghold is celebrating the 19th best Josh Brolin movie with a Labor Day sale. Pick up your mag case between the 25th of August and the 5th of September for a voluptuous 30% off. Thank you very much for Tabletop Stronghold for sponsoring my channel. I think some of the most fun I've ever had in my hobbies was dragging my friends to play doubles Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, and that's the least fun game ever conceived. So Warhammer doubles must be a blast. Spoilers, it absolutely is, and you guys have to try doubles out. But this doubles event isn't just the perfect way to get some practice in, it's also an excuse to get my girlfriend to paint her army and play. And it just sounded like a fun weekend away. So I pitched the plan to her in the most charismatic way I know how, and her beautiful face reached levels of disinterested I didn't know the human face could even convey. So I turned to the nuclear option. I took her on an all expenses paid trip to her favourite place in the world, the theme park. And as it happens, the pitch went a lot smoother under these conditions, and I got her on board. So here's what we need to do. We both need battle-ready 1,000 point armies, and we need to know how to play them. I need to actually learn the rules of 10th edition, and I need to pass that information on to my girlfriend. We have exactly 2 weeks to do all this. That is absolutely doable given the time frame. Overly confident and even more overly excited, I signed up and paid for our tickets, just to immediately remember one small hiccup. My girlfriend, who I will henceforth stop referring to as my girlfriend and just name drop because she didn't want a stupid made-up internet name like Shagrot, her name's Mo, is about to go on a holiday with her family for 10 days. So that lovely 2-week window instantly became 4 days, 2 of which she has 12-hour shifts at work. So in the blink of an eye, 2 weeks became 2 days. Typical. I didn't lose faith, however. I knew for a fact we could paint up 2k points of models in 2 days. I've only ever done one tournament before, and it was about 4 years ago, but me and my 2 friends left painting our whole armies till the day before, and the 3 of us painted 6,000 points in total in one sitting, and even got a bit of sleep in before the tournament. While Mo was away on holiday, I started concocting my list. As it turns out, despite the near universal doom posting about the Emperor's Children Codex, it ended up being incredibly powerful, and I got in quite a few practice games on TTS with my friend who I also convinced to come to the doubles tournament with me. These were the first games I played with an army that I waited 15 years to make their debut, the army I've obsessed over for months. And the army that I think has finally dethroned knights is my favourite army. And you know what? I kind of don't like how they play. It's a very finicky army that took me back to 7th edition Harlequins. An army I really wanted to play, but it was just too shenanigan-y for me. The army also really doesn't feel like it hits hard at all, with the sole exception of that absolutely absurd Wings Demon Prince, which is not long for this world. That unit will be obliterated by the nerf hammer at some point. My biggest issue of the army is that every single army list has two things in common. Firstly, free of absolutely every good data sheet, just a symptom of not having much to work with. And two, every single list uses the same detachment. Now, Coteries of the Conceited is an incredibly well-designed detachment that's both powerful and fun, but because absolutely everyone is playing it, it just feels a bit lame to me now. Luckily, there is one thing in this book that still has me by the balls: demons. I fucking love demons, and Slaanesh has by far the coolest demons. And very quickly in my testing, I latched onto the demons detachment. It doesn't have the same damage cap as Coteries, which is concerning because this army does not do much damage, but it does get access to its damage much easier and quicker, with less counterplay from the opponent. The stratagems are bad. Of the 5 practice games I played, I couldn't get any of these to come up except for the -1 damage. Probably just because I'm not very good at the game, but like, these are really situational. There is one really cool stratagem that lets you pick up a unit of demonettes and next turn deep strike them 6 inches away from the enemy. That does make me really feel like I'm summoning demons, but for 2 CP that's tight. Speaking of demonettes though, I think they might actually be cracked. Definitely the linchpin of my playstyle. I've not really heard anyone talk about these, but for 90 points you get 10 bodies with 30 AP1 dev wound attacks that move 9, deep strike and have an aura of sustained hits, and they fight first. This feels like a really crazy unit. With a direction locked in not only for the doubles event, but probably London as well, I started scouring the internet for cheap Slaaneshi demons, and I struck gold. 50 demonettes for £50, what a bargain. That'd be like 130 quid for Games Workshop. With these new demonettes on the way and my army box very slowly getting painted up, I had my list here somewhere, I just need to find it exactly. But this is where the most insane thing in my entire hobby lifetime happened to me. The guy I bought the demonettes from messaged me and said that he'd found a couple of extra Slaanesh bits that he'd chuck in for free. That's pretty cool, I thought. I'd like to have some extra bits laying around for some potential kit bashes. Turns out the bits in mention were 3 Fiends of Slaanesh, 5 Seekers, an utterly insane Demon Prince kit bash, and a fully built and stunningly painted Keeper of Secrets. I was so stunned, I paced around my room for hours. I had to double check this wasn't all sent to me by accident. But no, the guy was just feeling turbo generous that day. Sat on the edge of my bed staring at my new Keeper of Secrets and knowing that Mo had a greater demon of her own, I could not think of anything more exciting than getting to run our greater demons together in this tournament. I was frothing at the mouth in anticipation. Unfortunately, the journey took a pretty sour turn from here. We're now 2 days away from the tournament. Mo's back from holiday and finished her shifts, but more than anything, she is stressed the fuck out. She has an entire army to paint and doesn't even know how to play the game. I've gone over the rules, but it's bouncing off her dome, and she won't be able to learn the game until she actually gets some practice. And at this rate, I don't know if we can even fit a game in. Day 1 of the paint-a-thon, and Mo did a pretty fantastic job. She wanted to make her army pumpkin themed, she's a big Halloween fan, and she got her entire army base coated by hand in a day. She did all of her plague bearers in subtly different oranges to mimic the vibe of a pumpkin patch where there's lots of different shades of orange. She even threw in a couple of greens and yellows. She did the horns and weapons a nice earthy brown to resemble the stem of a pumpkin, and the guts are a nice vibrant yellow. I wasn't totally sold on the scheme until she got started on her Great Unclean one, who at the time she thought was Nurgle himself, so spent a lot of time on him alone. For a literal first time model painter, this is incredible. It's far from finished here, but the skin has so much depth and seriously does look like a pumpkin. I was and still am so impressed by the effort she put into this army as someone who didn't even want to go to the event. Want to know how much painting I got done? You're absolutely correct. I got 0 models painted, because I left my main channel video to the very last minute and was rushing to get it finished before we went to Nottingham. With 1 day remaining, I got my video done and Mo put a lot of paint down, but we still had a lot to do. And we were going to have to spend a big chunk of that day travelling to Nottingham. Our plan was to meet up with our friends and do one final paint push in the Airbnb. But before any of that, it was time to submit our lists. I love this part of a tournament because once you've locked in your list, there's no going back. I'll do a full rundown of the lists just before the battle reports, but upon locking in our lists, we needed to enter a team name. Seeing as we were doing this mere hours before the deadline, everyone else had already locked in, so we got to see the names beforehand. Most teams were a clever combination of armies they were running. For example, there was an Emperor's Children and Death Guard team called Fashionably Foul, which I loved, and an Ultramarine and Custodes combo called Daddy's Favorites. With that in mind, it took me about half a second to land on the perfect team name. the Pumpkins, and Pedo. But that name falls apart unless everyone in the room knows the reference, so I quickly amended it to the Pumpkins and Perverts. With the lists and the team name locked in, I laid in bed ready to wake up in a painting frenzy, but I couldn't drift off. Instead, I laid in bed eyes wide open till 6 AM. I stayed up all night in a dread. I don't want to rush my Emperor's Children models. I mention my nights a lot, but I never show them on screen because, truth be told, I'm kind of ashamed of how they're painted. The entire army was painted in one night before a tournament, and whilst that's still a big feat, you can kind of tell from the paint job. Blocky, uneven, monocolor paint schemes. I am so passionate about my Emperor's Children army, I don't want to do this again. After a sleepless night and 40 minutes before list submission ends, I made a drastic change. I switched my lists to Custodes. I was unbelievably excited to take my new demons out for a spin, but I had 50 models to paint in one day. I just wasn't gonna do it. I know it's not as cool, and the entire point of this event was to practice my Emperor's Children, but if I switch to my Custodes, I only have to paint 7 models. And Custodes are a much better army to learn the fundamentals of the game with. And in retrospect, this was the right decision. We wake up at 10 AM. I'm running on about 3 hours of sleep. Mo is in a frantic rush to pack our suitcase, and I go complete my pre-tournament ritual. I got this when I started going to Pokemon TCG regionals, but I love to get my beard trimmed and a facial before I go to any sort of event. The feeling of setting off to a big event you've practiced for months with such a fresh face is just unmatched. If you take anything away from this video, please give this a try, you will not regret it. We arrive in Nottingham, meet up with the boys for about 5, and here comes the biggest folly of the entire video. Now this is going to sound like a stupid tangent, but I swear it's so critical for this video. For the last 4 years, I have been so desperate to eat at Jollibee's. It comes from binge watching Mike Chen's series when he traveled the world exploring different 7-Elevens during my early uni years, and that guy sweared by Jollibee's. And Nottingham was finally my chance to try Jollibee's out. I had actually fasted in preparation just so I can justify eating a lot of food here. Me and the boys hit Jollibee's and stayed there for about 3 hours, and we sampled basically the entire menu. We got back to the flat at 9 PM, and it just wasn't enough time to get everything painted up. Whilst I didn't have too many blokes to paint it up, I still needed to build a box of Terminators and a box of Spite Riders to kit bash my jet plates. That alone took me 2 hours because I'm an awfully slow builder. Mo had it even worse, as she needed to prepare 40 models in just a handful of hours. As we rapidly approached 2 PM, we realised that concessions needed to be made. My friends decided to push the limits of what battle painted schemes meant, with a thick green coat substituting a base. I realised that I just didn't have enough time to repaint my secondhand Custodes, so I basically had 2 paint schemes going in on my army, which really killed my excitement to play them. Mo unfortunately just didn't have the time to paint most of our army, and had to settle with an unpainted force. This was so crushing to her, as despite not even wanting to play at this event, she did really like her army, especially her Great Unclean one, which was coming along amazingly, but she didn't get to finish. This was such a blow to her confidence, and she really didn't want to go after this. We both went to bed feeling extremely defeated, and just not wanting to play the game. Mo especially just wanted to go home at this point, but between tickets, travel, Airbnb, and a lot of Jollibee's, I was already £300 deep at this point, and none of this is tax deductible unless this video gets made. So with that extremely shallow motivation keeping me going, we drifted off and collected our 5 hours of pre-tournament sleep. We woke up in a dread. My friends didn't really care that their armies looked, well, shit, but Mo was incredibly deflated. We were both just embarrassed to show up with half-painted models. My friends ran to the corner store to get me an ice-cold, crisp white monster, which is a surefire way to get me out of bed, and we arrived at the venue, an awesome little joint called 7th Cities Collectible. If you're ever in Nottingham, you should absolutely check that out. It was absolutely rammed in there, which I enjoyed because I like checking out all the armies. 0 AdMech players, by the way. But Mo hated how hot and busy it was. Pairings for round 1 goes up. And sorry to call my opponents out here, but they had a very lame name. Literally just their names. Harry over here has 2 first names. What kind of name is Harry Dan? Wait. No fucking way! So if I wasn't already feeling dreadful about the state of my army, these mad lads brought one of the most stunningly painted Custodes armies I've ever seen that literally mocked the fuck out of mine, but they also brought maybe the coolest model I've ever seen on the tabletop. But enough stalling, there's only one more thing to do before I finally get to the battle report. It's about time I showed you our lists. I went with Alliance of the Emperor's detachment. This gives your units a very potent damage buff if they're 6 inches away from all friendly models. This does include Mo's Nurgle models for the purposes of this double event. I really like this detachment as it exemplifies my favourite aspect of the Custodes, their individualism. I run a bug captain with the Admani Mortis enhancement, an unbelievable damage amp, plus 3 strength, plus 1 AP and plus 1 damage for 10 points. I run a second bug captain with a much harder to pronounce enhancement that gives it lone op and stealth, as well as a Terminator captain with superior creation. This lets him stand back up after dying. This suite of characters runs me 500 points, but I do love a bit of Hero Hammer. I then rounded off my list with a squad of bikes, not kit bashing the bugs though, that annoyed the shit out of me the entire time, a squad of Terminators for some objective play, and some guards with my leftover points. This is a very elite list, but the idea is that Mo's Nurgle can do all the boring stuff while I run around with fun cool characters. Speaking of Mo, for her list, we actually chose not to run the Nurgle Demon detachment, despite it being a really sleeper strong build. We instead chose Demonic Incursion for ease of use. Her list is helmed by a Great Unclean One with the 4-up Feel No Pain enhancement, which comes in at 295 points. Not to sound too salty, but this is only 5 more points than the Keeper of Secrets with no enhancements. It's about 5 Keepers tough and hits about 2 Keepers hard. His name's Lumpkin, by the way, named after the first ever pumpkin we carved together. The only other character is this stunning Nurgle Demon Prince kit bash, which is actually running a Mark of Khorne, because we had the leftover points for the Khorne Beat Stick enhancement. Though his main job is just to stand behind the Great Unclean One and give it stealth. A squad of Nurglings that were beyond useless, we just could not figure out how to use infiltrators properly. 3 squads of Plague Bearers. I really like these guys because they're hyper efficient objective holders, and Mo really like these guys because they've got perky little butts. And lastly, a squad of Plague Drones. Chose these over 10 more Plague Bearers despite them costing the same and being worse for the sake of variety. But the extra movement was a massive deal in the end. Now I'm going to need to apologise here as this isn't going to be a proper battle report. As of writing this, the event took place almost 3 months ago. These videos take a long ass time to make, so there's going to be a lot of approximations here. But I'm going to try and get it as accurate as possible. And I'm going to try to go to another event before London so I can practice making battle reports. That said, I cannot stress this enough when I say the first game of this event was the single most wild game of anything I have ever fucking played. Like, I will never top the fun I had in this game. Deployment starts out like this. I'm poised to start playing aggressive and take points. I noticed my opponent had deployed his dreadnoughts very far back, so I deploy on the line. We decided it's best to just ignore the Harridan and let us do its thing. This was our first mistake, as the Harridan, despite being the size of a well-fed pug, isn't actually that durable in the slightest. We could have easily focused it down turn 1. I move everything forward, staged, or what I thought was staged, to trade on objectives. Mo gets a nasty advanced roll on the Great Unclean One, taking it just inches away from the center objective. And that's all from us. I felt happy with this turn 1. Opponents go first, and not to sound too dramatic, but after like 3 minutes of them moving their models, it was evident we had lost the game already. Here's mistake number 2 of this game. I did not ask my opponent how fast his models move. Back in my day, if it had 2 legs, it moved 6 inches, and that's always stuck with me. But Custodes dreadnoughts move blisteringly fast while somersaulting over walls. I can't remember the exact details of their first turn, but I certainly do remember carrying every single one of my models away. I was completely tabled, except for my Terminators in Deep Strike. Massive blunder there. I told Mo that she had to win this game 2v1 or she wasn't getting fed that night. And spoiler, she got shockingly close. The Harridan moved from their deployment to ours, shitting out characters along the way because apparently that model's a transport. It unloaded all of its weapons into the Great Unclean One. I assume they're pretty good, but I'm not sure because they bounced off the Great Unclean One's sweaty ass. All the remaining guns were sunk into the Great Unclean One, resulting in virtually no damage, except for an anti-Psyker Assassin which wounds the Great Unclean One on 2s. That thing sunk like 8 wounds into it every turn, which really put it on a clock. It's our turn 2, and all we can do is cling to objectives and hope that's enough. The Great Unclean One plants its ass down on the center objective where its mission survive. A tough task as it was staring down a Telemon and 2 Contemptor Dreadnoughts. But in a genuine stroke of genius from Mo, who still barely knows how to play a game, she drops down a wall of Plague Bearers 6 inches away from both the Dreads and the Great Unclean One. That actually made me jealous as she just summons demons. That's like literally my thing. Back in our deployment, the Demon Prince did not take its Mark of Khorne lightly, as with the help of some Plague Bearers and Plague Drones which give a critical boost to wounding, it brought down the Harridan to just a single wound. Everything else sat on objectives. A shockingly strong turn from just half of our army. Their turn 2 and they full send into the Great Unclean One. The freshly summoned Plague Bearers took up a full turn of shooting just to be cleared, which was huge for us, though the assassin still took out a chunk of the Great Unclean One. The Harridan retreats back to their side of the board and takes a pot shot at the Great Unclean One. Once again, no damage. It's combat time, and I snapped one of the hardest combat shots I've ever got. They go all in. Sword meets fat, beer meets vomit, and in the end, the Great Unclean One stands tall with 1 wound remaining, and on the crackback with an offensively good strike profile, 40 points cheaper than the Keeper of Secrets, by the way. With one mighty swing from Lumpkin's Great Bell, a Contemptor is sent to the afterlife. Unbelievable combat for us. It's the start of our turn 3, and the Great Unclean One heals up 3 wounds from its army rule. Factoring in its 4 up Feel No Pain, it's effectively at 8 wounds up from 1. Mo locks the fuck in. While every other unit is in scoring mode, the Great Unclean One is on a path of vengeance. It has no way to fall back and charge, so she decides to keep it engaged and face tank a round of melee from 2 powerhouse units in order to get a strike in. Combat rolls around quickly, and once again the Great Unclean One is brought down to a single wound remaining. And in a dazing strike of deja vu, another Contemptor is sent into the waiting maw of Nurgle himself. It's at this moment, while me and Mo are laughing way too hard and people are gazing over us, that our opponents dropped to the floor and started doing push-ups. Were they stunned at the unshakable mass of the Great Unclean One? Had its putrid flubby physique inspired them to get fit? It turns out they were doing a charity challenge where for every single 1 they rolled on the dice, they'd donate some pennies and do a push-up. This is where I pull one of the lamest moves of my entire lifetime, and you guys are welcome to roast me for it in the comments. I offered to promote their cause in this video, but I didn't write down what their charity was. I thought I could just remember it, but with my horrendous memory and the fact this was some months ago now, I couldn't remember for the life of me what their charity was. If by some miracle you're watching this, Mr. Terry Mon, post a link to your charity in the description and I'll pin it. Anyway, on their turn 3, they decide to go even more all in and send every last model they have at the 1 HP Great Unclean One. The Harridan fires its snot cannons, delivering yet another 0 damage payload. A Tyranid tank appears out of nowhere, firing its horsecock cannon at point blank range. Once more, the Great Unclean One feels nothing. Every bolter and every grenade is hurled directly at his fat fucking ass, but he just doesn't give a shit and takes no damage. Everyone who says movement is the most important stat of the game has never played with a toughness 13 model. It's combat time and we know the jig is up. After a brutal 0 damage from the Telemon, we interrupt. The Telemon was pretty low, so we assign some chip damage at it and do all the extra attacks into the penis tank. We kill neither, but bracket the tank. After a flurry of tiny attacks, one of them finally breaks through and downs the Great Unclean One. It's a shame, but at least you got its points worth, I said to Mo as she carried him away. But before we packed away our Great Unclean One, our opponents remind us that we need to check to see if it explodes. I thought that was a vehicle thing, so I didn't even know that monsters could explode. Mo rolls the dice. 6 to explode, 6 on damage. As one final fuck you to our opponent, the Great Unclean One shits itself so hard as it dies, it kills the Telemon, the Exocrine, and the Harridan in one stinky swoop. We asked our opponents to tally up how many points they estimate the Great Unclean One killed, including enhancements, and they said somewhere between 12 to 1500 points. Absolutely unreal. Easily the most exciting game of Warhammer we've ever played. We called it here as time was almost up. Despite the monstrous rampage the Great Unclean One went on, we still lost. I don't remember exactly what happened, but we were just outscored around the map. But not including the points we lost from having unpainted armies, we only lost by like 4 points. This was a fantastic game with fantastic opponents. And to our opponents' credit, they did know going all in on the Great Unclean One was a suboptimal move, but since they sealed the game turn 1 by wiping me, they just wanted to have a laugh. Game 2 wasn't quite as memorable, but I'll do my best to summarize. We're against Iron Faith, a Necron and Black Templar combo. I deploy basically the same, but this time I ask my opponent's movement characteristics. The Great Unclean One is just out in the open where he belongs. We go second this time. Once again, I made a huge blunder in my deployment. I had deployed my lone op bug captain next to some infiltrators. I did ask them what they were, and they said they were just some scouts, so I thought my bike would be fine. What they failed to mention was that these just scouts were kitted up with multi-melters each, and they one-shot my bike captain off the table. This was pretty annoying, and normally I would call this a gotcha moment, as just some scouts implies that they have like bolters or something. But this was our opponent's first event, and I do think this was just a simple mistake. They were very nice opponents for the record. I also forgot that just because you can't charge out of a transport doesn't mean you can't shoot, and shoot they did. Once more, I was tabled turn 1. Let's see if the Great Unclean One can run it back. This table was very friendly to shooting armies, and there was 2 huge diagonal shooting lanes that ran through the map. Our opponents parked a Doomsday Ark and a Gladius of some sort on each of the lanes, and they sat there the entire game volleying shots into the Great Unclean One, who took it like an absolute champ. This game is much more murky to me, so I won't go turn by turn, but it was very close. The Great Unclean One lived all the way until turn 5 in the midboard, not only surviving unreal shooting from 2 mega death tanks, but also round after round of combat from some melee Necrons. The game came down to a single point we just couldn't take. Whilst the Great Unclean One is probably the single hardest to remove model in the game, these Necron snakes might be a real contender. To win the game, all we had to do was get 8 OC on this objective. My Terminators and Mo's drones sat on the point the entire game, but we just couldn't move a single snake off the point, narrowly losing us this game. This was an incredibly close game, largely due to a sick move from Mo, where she dropped some Plague Bearers on their home field objective, which survived way too long. Not including our unpainted points once again, we were only a single digit points away from winning. Another decent game. It's the final game of the day and we're against the friends we came with. They had not had nearly as much fun as we had and they were really burnt out. I forgot to mention, but this event was mid-heatwave and in an incredibly cramped room. It was like a furnace. So we decided to speedrun the last game. We played only using our warlords. Bug Captain versus Dreadnought versus Farsight versus the Great Unclean One. Take a wild guess who won that one. So that was the tournament. It was a blast, for me at least. Whilst Mo performed shockingly well on the table, she didn't enjoy the tournament nearly as much as I did. She just has a very tiny social battery. More importantly, what did I learn for London? Well, here's my takeaway from the event. Number 1. Lone Op is not the invincibility I thought it was. I really need to consider what can shoot after a turn of movement. Speaking of, number 2, holy shit, I need to start pre-measuring. Probably my biggest takeaway from this whole event is that I just wasn't factoring in how my opponent would move into anything I did, and that needs to change. Number 3, I really need to learn how to use infiltrators. I just don't really get it. Each game you wanted to move block stuff with Nurglings, but they blocked absolutely nothing and they just handed over secondaries. Move blocking feels like it should be so simple in theory, like just put your stuff in the way of their models. I just couldn't make it work. The Nurglings did nothing all day. Number 4, I don't need to deploy everything on the line. This is especially true for Emperor's Children as they're so fast they can go anywhere they need to anyway. Number 5, I'm gonna need to spend so much more time painting than I had first anticipated. And lastly, number 6, Nurgle demons are like sick. Like I had so much more fun helping Mo with her army than I did playing with my own models, partly because mine got wiped every turn. The Great Unclean One is a beast and getting to drop Plague Bearers wherever I want, that really did feel like I was summoning shit. I'm genuinely so jealous of her army. That was the end of the event, but that's not where the Warhammer stopped. One thing you'll notice if you ever get to play Warhammer in Nottingham is that everyone uses Forge World models. Like there was just Forge World shit everywhere and it made me so jealous. So we headed out of the venue and drove straight to Warhammer World to pick up a token to remember the weekend. Unlucky for my girlfriend, my YouTube bucks hit my bank account mid-tournament, so I knew exactly what I wanted. Warhound's Titan. The perfect centerpiece for my Emperor's Children. But despite Warhammer World being 6 feet away from the Forge World factory, they had a very limited selection of models, and the only Titan they had was the Warlord Titan. A bit much for my first Forge World purchase. There were still a couple of good options though. I don't really like playing Tyranids, but I do really enjoy painting them, as they take the contrasts well, and they really fit my favourite colour palette of pink, white and green perfectly. And the Bio Titan I had certainly would have been a nice little painting project. I don't play nor like World Eaters, but man, the Brass Scorpion would have looked fantastic in pink. But I don't know, it's a bit of a flavour fail for Emperor's Children. But then I found it. A model that I never really wanted, but somehow struck me as the perfect purchase. The Chaos Decimator. The biggest miss of the Emperor's Children release was not having a demon engine, so this will fit the hull perfectly. I spent about half an hour deciding on what weapons to pick for it, but I landed on the Claw to fit the Emperor's Children preference of flashy fast melee, and I picked the Fleshlight Cannon to fit the Emperor's Children everything. If you ever pass by Nottingham, I can't recommend the Warhammer Museum at Warhammer World enough. It's just unreal. Wonderful way to wrap up the weekend. What I can recommend is not getting the wings at Warhammer World. They were really grim actually. To end this video off, I just want to say that if you can find a doubles tournament, you should absolutely grab a friend and give it a go. They're not quite as competitive, but they are extremely fun, even for newbies. Thank you all very much for watching. Cheers.